The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. This is Rob Thiessen with Print Audit Software, and today we're going to be going through the third and final session of the RemoteFleet training. What we'll be looking at today is how to introduce RemoteFleet to your customers, and we're going to look at some of the tools that we as a company have been using for a while with a great deal of success. And I'm also going to try to open it up a little bit today and answer your questions on the fly, look at some of the interface, the reporting. We can go into the GUI, if you will, the user experience with both Facilities Manager and the Print Audit 6 analysis rules and recovery capability. So as usual, please feel free to ask any questions that you have right on the spot. When they come to mind, just type them into the chat window that's on the webinar console, and Susan will be then able to perhaps interrupt me at that point. I'm happy to answer questions as they come up, so please type them into the chat window, and then Susan will relay them to me as we go along. Now, I want to thank you for joining us once again and taking the time to learn a little bit more about RemoteFleet, and on behalf of Print Audit and Sharp Electronics Corp, we hope that this information is going to provide you with some useful ideas. Now, without further ado, let's get started on the presentation. So, in a review of the first session, we were talking about printer versus printing management, and we were speaking about how the technologies today can kind of be divided up into two categories, device monitoring and desktop monitoring. So when we're talking about device monitoring, we're talking about all of those tools and capabilities that are focused on the information that the printer knows about itself. That's the meter readings, the supplies levels, the service status. This is where you get your TCO calculations from, as well as device history and so forth. Whereas printing management is focused on the desktop and what the users are doing. And this is, of course, the second element of print management in general, and this is where you get an understanding on how to save money through changes in workflow, changes in end-user behavior, selecting different options on the printers such as duplex or color versus black and white, so on and so forth. Now, when we went into session 2, we looked at the specific tools that dealt with those two areas. For Facilities Manager, that's the printer management capability. We talked about the information collection engine driving that program. This was a way of capturing MIB data from network-connected devices. It was a fully hosted web service, and as an ASP model, you're billed monthly for it, so there's no big upfront fees, and you simply pay for the devices that you're monitoring. Now, Print Audit 6, on the other hand, with the analysis rules and recovery capability, is a desktop client. The client is installed to the workstations in the environment and doesn't specifically speak with the printers. It actually monitors the Windows print subsystems, so you get all the workflow and local print data that might be available from the desktop. Of course, that is the only way to track local printing, is from the desktop. So this data tends to be a little bit more mission critical, a little bit more personal in nature. It includes document titles, the names of users printing in the environment, and this product, of course, is a software purchase that the customer would use on an ongoing basis. So those are the two technologies involved in printer and printing management. And so now let's take a look at the tools that we use to present these capabilities to customers. And I'm going to introduce you to the MIF review, the Machines and Field review, as well as have a look at what you can do with your own free trial or demo room copies of the software. Now, we'll be focusing a little bit on assessment reports and how to take that information and turn it into your opportunities. We're also going to look at how quarterly reports and reviews of data can, keep you top of mind and put you in a position of consultant to your customer, which is really what you want to do. Now, when we look at the MIF review, this is one of the most effective tools that we have today in order to communicate the ROI potential of print management. It looks at the customer's current print environment, keeping in mind what they want to accomplish with the software in terms of maybe rules or efficiencies that they want to introduce into the environment. And then it actually provides you with an ROI, a projection of when this software will pay for itself in your customer's environment. And I'm going to go to an actual spreadsheet now in order to demonstrate how this tool works. Now, to begin with, I want to mention that we're looking at both dealer results and customer results. So you can see the two tabs at the bottom of the page here. Dealer results, of course, refer to the benefits that you're receiving from print management in terms of migration. Okay, migration of volumes over to the printers that are under your control or being managed by you as a company. The customer, of course, reaps the benefit of lower cost per page and also some environmental impact, but we'll go into that in a minute. This spreadsheet allows you to enter information on the fly, and at the point where you're presenting to the customer, you would be doing all of this in exactly the same way I am now. So keep that in mind. This is a customer-facing presentation that I'm demonstrating to you. So if you are the dealer and you want to promote your products in this customer's environment, of course, in any situation, you're going to be looking at the customer's overall volumes. What often happens, though, is dealers forget to look at the entire page volume for the environment, which includes, of course, any printing to local or parallel connected devices. Now, we often hear people just kind of dismissing that as, well, that's not really that big a deal. I was in one situation where an assessment was conducted at a lawyer's office, and within 2 hours of starting the software, it was interesting because we were just looking to see whether or not the client had been deployed successfully. And immediately a number jumped out to the administrator who was looking at the results saying, here's a person printing 200 plus pages to an inkjet printer within the first 2 hours of running the assessment. And this administrator had no idea, that this was going on. Once they spoke to the individual that did that, they realized that this was something that individual had been doing on an ongoing basis, day in, day out. And it was happening under their noses, never understood or never really fully appreciated by the company. But at that point, of course, they made a change. So the point I'm making is that you don't know what you don't know. And so never assume that something isn't a problem until you can confirm that it isn't actually a problem. And that's the case with inkjet and desktop printers. If they're in the environment, you can be sure they're being used. Now, when we get that, sorry for running on there, but I just wanted to make that point up front, that this total pages is for all printers in the environment, not just the multifunctions or not just the copiers, the ones that are predictable and the ones that you know about. You've got to get down to the full number because that's the total opportunity. We then look at what proportion of the total volumes in that environment are actually going to managed printers, or conversely, which proportion are not going to the managed printers and going to the unmanaged printers instead. And when we talk about unmanaged printers, we're talking about printers that generally have a higher cost per page. And that's because they're the ones that nobody's kind of paying attention to. They're the ones that are on the desk, or the network printers that everybody's using consistently every day, but nobody's really keeping track of exactly what's going on those devices. And in most cases, we'll use the number half of the pages. We'll use the ratio of half the pages are going to managed versus half the pages going to unmanaged. That's a very conservative estimate. We usually find that the unmanaged pages are a majority in the environment. So they often make up more than half of the volume in the environment. We also have a number for color printing here, and you can adjust this to any value you want to based on the customer's own trends and what you've observed in that environment. Once you've got those basic numbers up top, we then look at the cost structure associated with each page printed in the environment. Now, the managed printers, once again, are the low cost per page printers, those ones, the multifunctions, if you will. Presumably, they have multifunctions. If they don't have multifunctions in the environment, then, of course, this value would be 500,000 pages because all of the printing would be going on at relatively higher cost printers. But and in that case, you've got a much bigger opportunity in terms of job migration over to a lower cost device. But let's look at, once again, the assumption that about half are going to the low-cost printers already. And those low-cost printers, let's say they have a cost of roughly 1 cent per page. That's perhaps what you're charging on a managed services program. Or actually, that's probably a little bit low. If you're looking at including equipment, it might be 2 cents per page or something of that nature. The low cost per page estimate on color might then be about 10 cents per page. And remember, this is including the cost of the device. Now, if you do the same for the unmanaged devices and include the upfront purchase price of the device, these numbers would probably show up at around 6 cents or 6.5 cents per page for black and white, and probably roughly 15 cents for color. Okay, so what I'm doing there is I'm just giving a general average cost per page between the relatively lower cost or managed printers in the environment, both color and black and white, and then the relatively higher cost unmanaged printers in the environment, both color and black and white, once again. And what we're left with is a low blended cost of roughly 3.5 cents versus a high blended cost of just over 8 cents per page. I hope everybody's following this so far, because this is just the precursor to actually demonstrating results. And once you go through these values and agree on them with your customer, you can now make projections about the value of print management in the environment, because at this point we can look at a migration strategy, and let's say a migration strategy that targets the jobs in the environment that are 25 pages or more. What our studies show is that those jobs usually comprise anywhere between 1 and 5% of the total printing, the total number of jobs in the environment, and yet even though they make up such a relatively low percentage of the total jobs, they actually contribute a very large amount to the percentage of volumes. That 5% of printing often accounts for more than 50% of the volume in the environment. So imagine if you were to have an impact on just those 5% of all print jobs that are over 25 pages. At that point, you might have an impact on roughly 40% of the page volume at that point. Okay, that's where we get the impact numbers from, is how targeting just a certain group of print jobs will result in an overall impact on page volumes. And in that case, that 40% impact is responsible for migrating another 100,000 pages over to the low-cost devices in the environment, or your multifunction devices, those that are earning you 2 cents for black and white and 10 cents for color per page. Okay? Now, based on those prices, that's a $36,000 increase in income in that customer site alone. So not bad. Now remember, what if there weren't any multifunction devices in the environment? What if all of the printing was relatively higher cost at that 6.5 and 15 cents? At this point, a 40% impact yields 200,000 pages moving over to your multifunction devices with $7,200 accruing to your increased income. So you can see how these numbers start to work with each other, and the color does the same thing. If we were to start migrating jobs over to the multifunction device just on color content alone, we can see that only 20% of the printing has color in the first place. So if we were to produce a message that informed the user that, hey, this job includes color, why don't you send it to the low-cost color device rather than printing it to the relatively higher-cost device? And if our users paid attention to that rule just 50% of the time, we would migrate another 30,000 pages of color over to your cost per page program. And at 10 cents per page, that's an additional $3,000 in income. So based on print management in this environment and based on the fact that this customer didn't have multifunction devices previously, we've now added 230,000 pages to the multifunction devices in a migration strategy. And this migration strategy, of course, affects the end users in the environment. But to what extent? Let's now look at the cost benefit to the customer, because if the end user is going to be affected in that environment, there's got to be a benefit for that effect, and that's of course in the customer results. We've got the same numbers under the customer results. Let's say the customer is, of course, spending roughly 3.5 cents on the low-cost printing that was coming from you and your devices versus the just over 8 cents that's coming from their regular devices, let's say the laser printers or the desktop inkjet printers in the environment. And if you were to have the same 40% impact based on that migration of pages, you'd save your customer $9,200 a month by migrating those pages over to your multifunction devices. Let's take that number back down to where we started with, and let's assume that they do have some multifunction devices already, and you are getting half of the volume on those low-cost devices now. What's the result then? Well, we're still saving the customer $4,600 a month as a result of this migration strategy. And remember, that migration strategy added 115,000 pages to your volumes each month with an additional income of $5,100. So this customer is also benefiting from that strategy to the tune of $4,600 a month based on just the migration on page size, as well as an additional $750 a month based on the migration on color. Now there's more ways in which the customer can save here, because duplex savings is also something that HP calculates will save the customer roughly half a cent in paper and energy costs alone. So this isn't even taking into account that they might have to duplex print on those multifunction devices and thereby reroute another whole percentage of the volumes. Let's just assume that the printer that they actually chose in the first place, which might be a higher cost device, also has that duplex capability. And in that case, by not printing the additional page, they're saving roughly half a cent in paper and energy costs. And if we were to apply a rule that was observed just 50% of the time by the users in the environment, that would add another $766 in savings. So we're starting to get up to some pretty significant savings for this customer on a year-over-year basis. That's $73,000 so far. Okay. Now, attrition is the last value that I want to talk about here in terms of a dollar savings. There's other ways in which I think down in the future we'll be seeing additional impacts on the bottom line, but attrition is a big one because it actually impacts overall printing. When users begin to recognize that they're being tracked in the environment and that there's rules associated with printing, they actually start to print a little less, and that's because they're no longer printing jobs that they abandon at the printer, so those stacks of pages that left on the printer at the end of each day start to disappear. And they also print less in terms of their own personal printing. If you've got users that are printing their vacation pictures in full color on the most expensive laser printers in the environment on a regular basis, it's likely you're not aware of that, or your customers aren't aware of that anyway. This would essentially stop that kind of behavior, because users would now recognize that, hey, anything I print, and especially those really costly prints, are going to be observed by my boss or administrator. So what we see is usually about a 5 to 10% fall off in printing, period. And that 5 to 10% will have an impact on overall printing. So that'll impact not only the unmanaged volumes in the environment, but also the managed volumes. So what we see here is an additional savings of $2,300 per month based on just that attrition value alone. Now, let's go back to the dealer results, because this number actually feeds back into your total volume. So if attrition seems like a bad word to you, just remember that the print management capability was actually migrating an additional 100. Before it was 115,000 pages a month. It's now dropped down to 106,000 pages a month as a result of the attrition. But remember, these are 106,000 extra pages that are coming to you as a result of print management. So, you know, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I guess, is what the message boils down to. You're providing your customer with a benefit, and you're certainly benefiting from that in the long run as well, to the tune of an additional 106,000 pages. So the total savings for the customer at this point is a significant $8,000 per month. And that $8,000 per month comes with an environmental benefit as well. That's not quantified in dollars, but is quantified in paper savings as well as CO2 offset. And we took numbers from HP and from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, in order to make up these values. And they're a result of essentially not cutting down trees, okay, because the EPA estimates that each tree is worth about 8,300 sheets of paper. Now, they also estimate that a tree will consume about 44 pounds of CO2 each year. If it's, of course, left standing, if it's cut down, that opportunity disappears. By the same token, each piece of paper that's manufactured creates CO2 at a rate of, you know, as you see here, a certain fraction of pounds per piece. So by not consuming 165,000 pages, and that's a direct result of these duplex and attrition savings, this customer is now saving 20 trees per month. That's 238 trees a year. There's a small forest there. And the total CO2 offset is 3,900 pounds per month, or 47,000 pounds a year. Okay, that's significant. And if you don't know what a pound of CO2 looks like, you're much like me. I do, however, know how many miles I've driven, in my car, and it's about twice the number that we see on here. But that's a lot of miles. 44,000 miles driven in a driven in a year would be the same, roughly the same value as the total CO2 offset, and it also equates to 889 propane tanks full of barbecue fluid. So that might help you visualize what it is that these total CO2 offset savings are really equivalent to.
Rob, we have a couple of questions in the queue.
Sure.
John has asked if there's a cost to use the SMIF review tool.
No, and we're going to provide this to everybody for download. You can. This particular spreadsheet is just an Excel spreadsheet, so anybody can use it, and anybody can take it and make the calculations and the adjustments to it, as I've just shown here. It's totally interactive, and it's free for your use.
And there's another question, whether there is a report that does not show the dealer benefit to the customer.
Yes, so we provide two versions of this spreadsheet. Obviously, I'm showing you the one now that has both the consumer results and the dealer results, but you can also take a spreadsheet that has just the customer results in it and show these numbers, these specific numbers, and apply these numbers right within that spreadsheet. So it'll obviously, won't contain the dealer results at that point. Any other questions?
No, that's it right now.
Okay, so here's the exciting part. There is a return on investment associated with this software. We've already seen the savings that are accrued to this customer, and they're to the tune of almost $100,000 a year in savings. But let's now look at what this environment really looks like in terms of the cost for the software and the months that it would take in order to get your return on investment. We're estimating, based on Gartner's statistics, that this environment contains roughly 600 individuals. Okay, and where I get that number from is Gartner estimates that each employee produces roughly 10,000 pages a year. So if we took this number here and we divided that or multiplied that by, well, you get the idea. There's a calculation involved with extrapolating the total number of employees based on the total number of pages that are being produced each month. And that extrapolation turns up here. Now, you could adjust this if you want to on the spreadsheet to show a different number if you know the exact but this is just a great way to guesstimate the number of seats you're going to require. And at 600 seats, you're looking at about a $19,000 package for just the rules alone. I think it's about $19,500. Oh, hang on one second. Didn't want it there. So it's $19,500 goes into the price for the software, which yields a return on investment of roughly 2.5 months in this case. Okay, so we've been conservative in our estimates of what the benefits are here. We've also been conservative in our estimates of what the total volume or total opportunity is in terms of unmanaged pages. Remember, in most environments, we find that unmanaged pages is equivalent to 70 or 80% of the total page volume. So if that was the case, this would actually look more like 350,000 pages that could be redirected. And at that point, of course, your ROI goes down from there. So now you've got 1.8 months. Any way you slice it, we found that in virtually all circumstances, your customer is going to see an ROI inside of 12 months. So that may not sound impressive to you, but it's actually, I find the sweet spot is really around 3 months. But we're so certain that that they're going to get an ROI in 12 months that we actually guarantee it. And that's a piece that I want to remember. I think it's unprecedented in the industry. We're telling customers that they can return the software a year out if they feel that they haven't got their money's worth out of it. Of course, we at that point turn off the software. They would no longer have use of the product. They could no longer use the rules capability. They could no longer use the recovery component. And, you know, we haven't had anybody take us up on that offer. So there's a very telling sign right there as to the value of the rules capability. So at this point, I'm going to go back to the presentation unless there's a question.
There's a few questions in the queue here.
Okay.
Are the metrics listed in your pop-up captions provided to us in the software?
The metrics listed in the pop-up captions. Yes, so okay. Are you talking about these metrics where I'm just mousing over the individual cells and we're seeing some of those EPA estimates and so forth? Because yes, all of that information is part of the spreadsheet. I hope that's what you're referring to. Let's take the next question, and maybe if somebody wants to clarify that, they can.
Yeah, he did clarify that that's exactly what he was asking.
Yeah.
There's a question from Robert. I might need more clarification on this. He's wondering if he could see, with all things being equal, an environment that is 100K to 50K.
Sure. So very simply, we go to 100K in total volumes, and let's say 50,000 of those pages are available for migration over to lower cost devices. And let's keep all of this other information the same for the sake of argument. What we see then is that the dealer benefits by migrating an additional 21,000 pages over to their cost per page for an additional roughly $1,000 a month in income. The customer, on the other hand, receives a benefit of $1,600 a month and or about $20,000 a year. We can see all of the environmental factors have changed. Now, we're estimating that this company has 120 employees now, not 600. And let's go with 125. We'll just round up on that. And that's roughly $8,200 retail. So $8,200 retail yields an ROI of roughly 5 months. So there you go. You're getting your money back in under 6 months. But something that I want to mention here, which is often, you know, the way you guys are going to be offering this software is in a lease package. You're probably going to be adding it to the cost of the hardware, and so perhaps your customer is paying for it on a monthly basis. Well, at that point, you know, the monthly charge on an $8,200 lease is probably going to be a lot less than $1,600. So this ROI is now replaced with a savings each month. It's not about how long the software takes to pay off itself. It's actually paying for itself each and every month that your customers are using it. So think about this for a second. What if you could provide your customers with a product that pays for itself from day one and feeds your multifunction devices and your contracted printers an extra 21,000 pages a month for an additional $1,000. Does that not sound like a no-brainer? I think it does. So, and that's the reaction we're getting from both dealers and customers. It just makes sense.
Based on the feedback from Robert here in the queue, I think he's very satisfied with that answer. We have another question from John wondering how long it would take to fully implement 600 seats of rules.
Well, we could have it done in an afternoon. Talk to our tech support. They'll help you determine what is the best deployment strategy for the environment, and then we'll simply deploy the client. It's 2 megabytes of code that go out to every desktop. We do so through any deployment strategy or methodology that the customer has available to them, and that might be, something like Active Directory, an MSI package launched based on Active Directory OUs, or it could be, a program like SMS or Alteris or ZenWorks. Doesn't matter. It takes very little time to deploy this solution into your customer's environment. It simply takes a willingness and the right people, usually the network administrator who has the ability to deploy software in that environment. That's the bottom line.
We have a question from Mark, and he asks, is the total RemoteFleet cost of $19,500 that you listed equipment costs only? Do we obtain this from the customer?
Okay, so what I quoted there was not an equipment cost, it was a software cost. And what I quoted is our regular retail pricing, so that was full retail for 600 seats of Print Audit 6 rules. Now, Sharp dealers will actually enjoy a better price than that, obviously, and they'll be able to offer it at roughly the same MSRP, but they're going to get a discount from that point through Sharp, and a fairly significant discount. So that ROI, of course, is based on a full retail price. If you want to charge your customer that, you can be sure they will get their money's worth. If you want to charge them less than that, that's your prerogative. It just means they'll, get more money's worth.
Okay, that's
I hope
the last
I answered the question
for now. Yep.
Okay, so going back to the presentation just for a moment here, let's look at the results of the MIF review. What happens after you show your customer that spreadsheet? Well, first of all, you use that ROI potential to promote an assessment. Why? Because what we did was we just used generalities there. We looked at the potential opportunity for migration. What we'd like to do is really identify the opportunity for migration. And how would we do that? Well, I showed you some reports yesterday, if you were on the session yesterday, that actually had the job size to printer breakdown and showed here's the number of jobs that were, we can bring that report up again as a matter of fact. Here's the number of jobs that were printed over to LaserJet printers over a certain page size, and that was, once again, the job size to printer breakdown. So if we're encouraging our customer to do an assessment, we can then take the data that we get from that assessment, and it might look something like this, and we can say, hey, look, here's all the printers that are doing more than 4 pages in your environment. Do we think that some of these shouldn't be taking more than 4 pages? Yes. Look at all these LaserJets. All these volumes here, okay, should be, reasonably routed towards the multifunction devices in the environment. There's more than 29 jobs worth 130 pages right here on a local printer, okay? Why not send those over to the multifunction devices and at that point save money on each and every page? Save significantly on each and every page. That's what you want to do. So going back to this presentation, your first priority could be the assessment. Now, perhaps your customer's completely bought in. Maybe they already know the results speak for themselves. And so at that point, of course, you're going to promote your equipment objectives. You're not going to hold up the sales cycle at all. You're going to go ahead and provide them with that low-cost printer or the managed print services package that you've been promoting and strategizing for the customer. Now, the last objective here, of course, is to promote the ongoing management. And that's a fairly self-serving message, admittedly, by us. But remember, there's one thing that's providing this ROI, and that is the actual gatekeeper. It's the software that's affecting the end user at the time of printing. If you don't use the software, then the end user will not be told how to print in the environment. And if they're not, if somebody's not looking over their shoulder, chances are, and human nature would suggest that they're going to go print to the most convenient printer available to them, and that's the one that's going to be the higher cost. And as evidence of this, I've been in environment after environment where there are multifunctions present, and yet the laser and inkjet printers in the environment are getting the vast majority of the pages. 80 to 90% of the pages are going to the laser and inkjet fleet. And yet the multifunctions exist. Why are they not getting more volume? Simple. User behavior, it's inertia within the environment. You need a catalyst in order to start moving those pages over to the multifunction devices, and when you do, you will see the volumes on those multifunction devices double, triple, and even quadruple. We've seen that time and time again. So, sorry to go on about that, but it's a very important message. And of course, the customer engagement strategy that works best is this collection of data. First of all, use the data to back up your assertions. Simple as that. And of course, that means determining which reports will best support your assessment objectives, and presenting this summary data in a simple way, not in a way that's overwhelming your customer with information, but just give them a few good, graphic reports that show what their environment looks like. Have the detailed reports to back up that data. So if the graphic report shows the average printing in the environment, then you have the detailed report supporting those averages in the background, so you can see, which user is printing exactly how much, that kind of thing. Now, as far as assessment strategies, there's volume migration. You can use the printer volume reports just to get a basic snapshot of all the printers in the environment. What are they outputting in terms of black and white and color? Which devices are the most used, etc. You can use the top 10 printers and top 10 users reports, the top 10 printer and the top 10 user reports, although it's not shown here, are a great way to recognize asset placement. And in conjunction with those top 10s, you've also got that printer to user breakdown, or conversely, the user to printer breakdown. There's two reports that kind of show from different perspectives which devices are being used by which individuals in the environment. We've also got model inventory reports that show you all of the different printer models in the environment, and it's surprising sometimes how many printer models will be up. You've got 100 printers in the environment and 50 different models. Those are the kinds of statistics that you want to jump on and take advantage of, because there's a great argument for standardization there. So at this point, I've gone through the presentation, and that doesn't mean this session is ended. I'm just going to leave the toll-free number on the screen there, and I'm going to start taking questions again. And once again, keep in mind that I'm more than happy to go into the interface on any of the programs, any of the reporting capabilities, any of the administrative components of the software. So I will go where you ask me to. Are there any questions in the queue?
Not right now.
Oh, okay, I guess I'm not going anywhere. Well, listen, I want to draw your attention while we wait for perhaps some questions that might come through here to our website. This is where a lot of information is available on the Print Audit products, including free trials as well as testimonials. We got a testimonial database with over 200 testimonials from customers that took the time to literally sit down and write some nice words about our company and our products on their own letterhead. And this is a very, very effective marketing capability that you should take advantage of with your customers. Just use testimonials, of course. And we've also got support pages there, which you can access tutorial videos on the product, as well as technical documents and so forth. Are there any questions?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to have to bid you adieu, and thank you for your time today. It's been great working with Sharp in the launch of the RemoteFleet suite, and we're very excited about the potential with all Sharp dealers to recognize the synergies between our capabilities and your products. So I hope this is a partnership that will start to flourish for both
Rob,
organizations.
we had a couple of questions just coming in about referencing back to the information and how to get materials on what you've presented. And I just wanted to remind everyone that we will be posting the recordings of this video in the very near future, and I will be sending out links to download the PowerPoint presentations to all attendees now that all 3 sessions are complete.
Great. And so I'm going to highlight the, I'm going to highlight the URL for RemoteFleet, and that once again, give me a second here, is www.sharpusa.com/RemoteFleet. That's a great resource site. It will allow you to access the NFR version of both products, so you can set up your demo rooms and do the demos for your customer of both capabilities. And is there anything else that I'm missing there, Susan?
No, not that I can think of. I think another question came into the queue. Just give me a moment.
Sure. And while I'm waiting, just to remind everybody, that 800 number you see on the screen in front of you, the 1-877-412-8348, is the number that you can receive sales support for any customer engagements you might be wanting to introduce print management into. So,
Mark was asking which modules are the reports that you showed us included in?
So the reports that I was going through there was all based on the analysis capability of Print Audit 6. So I wasn't showing any of the facilities manager reports at the end. I was showing all Print Audit 6 reports, and that's available through the basic analysis component. And if you recall, analysis is part of every sale of Print Audit 6.
That appears to be the last question today.
All right. Well, once again, on behalf of Print Audit and Sharp Electronics Corporation, I want to thank everybody for their time and attention, and we hope that you'll call us up soon and let us know how we can help you. I wish you good luck with your sales. Bye, everybody.